Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to offer Dana, then please do go to justthiszen.org/giving. Your support really does make a huge difference. Thank you so much.
So, hello everybody. I feel really glad to have this opportunity to reflect with you on what was a really special, important time for me. Um, so basically, from October the 2nd last year until the 25th, I took part in Upaya's fall practice period. So for those of you who don't know Upaya, do go on YouTube and look at some of their talks. You know, they put all kinds of things online. Um, and I think that was one of the things that drew me to them, that I listened, I took part in some of their courses and talks kind of the year before, and found myself quite drawn to them. So this all began way before that. For several years, I've carried the dream of spending time in a Zen monastery. At first, I thought it would be Tassajara or Green Gulch, but slowly, I felt much more pulled to Upaya. So I started by inquiring with them about doing residency, you know, which I later realised was my habit of jumping in the deep end. Like if I'm going to do something, I'll kind of throw myself at it. But during correspondence with them, they suggested that I start with a practice period. They do 3 practice periods a year. Apparently, they used to do 3 months, but because it's so hard for people to take 3 months out, they've divided them and they do them, you know, over the course of the year. So I chose the autumn one, which I think was a good choice. Beautiful. New Mexico is beautiful in the autumn. Um, yeah, lovely weather, lovely place to be. Um, so on September the 18th, I retired from my psychotherapy practice, and 12 days later, I flew to Santa Fe. So it felt like the adventure began when I entered Manchester Airport. Said goodbye to William. I met so many interesting people on the journey. I think it began with someone called Ellie heading to Arizona for a somatic course and a hiking holiday. On my Dallas flight, I sat next to someone called Sharon. The For some reason the entertainment, you know, the little TVs on the back of the seats weren't working, so we talked. We three women sat together. We talked the whole journey. Sharon was a very beautiful black woman who told me she did events organizing, and she especially organized African weddings. And she spent time showing me how she would source these materials and make the dresses herself, and all these kind of lovely photos. So I had a great time. I had a great time traveling across. When I got to Dallas, huge airport, but somehow it all just flowed. They've got something called a Skylink shuttle, like one of these planes that takes you from terminal to terminal. And yeah, I met two American airline guys who figured out which gate I needed to get to and how I needed to get to it and showed me the way. So then I reached the place for flight to Santa Fe, which was from going from a huge plane. It was really quite a small plane. Once I got to Upaya, I discovered a lot of people fly to Albuquerque just because there's more choice, bigger airport. But you know, I didn't have a clue, and it was quite fun going to Santa Fe. It's um, it's a small, quite quirky airport. Reminded me of something out of the Wild West. And I arrived after I think it was about 9:30 at night, and discovered that it's really hard to get a taxi or an Uber after 9 at night. So I went out the front of the airport and like gathered with this group of very interesting, quirky individuals. Um, we had we didn't half have an interesting conversation and a good laugh. However, there was someone there called John and his wife, and they had like this line of leopard skin suitcases, and on the end was this kind of metal reinforced case. Um, and when I inquired what on earth it was, he said, "Oh, that's how I carry my firearms." So I discovered he was hunting. He was off hunting. Um, Quite a funny guy. So I managed to get a lift in their lift, which is LYFFTT, which is kind of like an Uber. Um, so we went to their hotel first, which was this amazing place, like these like flaming braziers with cowboys to meet them, and it's really kind of posh spot they were staying in. So we dropped them off, and then I got taken to my much more modest hotel in the town centre, or the kind of the old part of Santa Fe. So spent a night there, and then in the morning, I knew they said to be up at to Upaya between 2 and 4 p.m. So I had a morning to explore around Santa Fe. It's a really colourful, like uh Mexico. I lived in Mexico once in my 20s, so I recognize like the Mexican feel to it, but a very kind of exclusive Mexico. Um, so I walked around these kind of posh art galleries and had a lovely morning. Um, the sun was shining. I found a cafe on the square and went and sat there and had pumpkin potolo soup before it was time to go up to Upaya. Um, So I expected it to be way up in the mountains, but actually, once I got an Uber, I discovered it was only about 10 minutes away. So it's much more in the foothills. So we drove up, and I was commenting on all these beautiful red adobe buildings. And the Uber driver told me that, this is millionaire territory. Lots of wealthy people now live in Santa Fe. So I arrived at Upaya around 2 o'clock, got dropped at one of the two car parks, um, and started wandering in. Followed a footpath and started wandering in. And I had that feeling of, kind of wanting to pinch myself, like, I'm here. Gosh, I am actually here. Um, so walking into Upaya, I was struck by a sense of peace. Everyone, it's not that there were not that many people there. People move about very quietly. When we were given instructions, we were told you walk in shushu with your hands held. So looking down, everything happened in a certain rhythm. So I had a feeling that you pyre like when you enter a big church or cathedral. Um, I described it to someone like entering, a beautiful painting where everything happens according to a certain rhythm. So someone found me and asked me if I just arrived. They showed me somewhere to sit by the Buddha out the front of the main temple. And went to get London, who was a young woman who was welcoming the newcomers. So she took me to my room, gave me a map, gave me my timetable. That was the first step. So when I signed up to Upaya, I signed up to dormitory accommodation, which I didn't know what that meant. I had this kind of image of like a boarding school, about 12 beds in it or something. But actually, it was a really nice room with just three beds. So I went in and met my roommates, um, Celine Marie and Mercedes. So I had the two very best roommates, two women who'd been to Upaya before, um, which was really helpful because they would give me like little nudges and information when I was kind of trying to figure things out. When I was just kind of just generally confused about where I was meant to be or what I was meant to be doing. Um, so it was lovely to meet them. We're still in touch with each other. Made such a good connection. I couldn't have had I couldn't have had two better roommates. Um, so I got rid of the map, gave up with that, and wandered around the campus. Upaya buildings are all very beautiful. Um, it's a lovely place to wander around. Certain place when you pass a temple, you always bow. Um, so there's a certain rhythm, a certain feeling um, walking around the place. So we got wandered around. The first sit was at 5:30 p.m. Entered the temple. I loved the temple. Um, a really, really beautiful space. It had 12 huge tree trunks holding it up. Um, Big wooden floor, very Japanese style. Um, it was really interesting because I was given a seat right in front of one of these big tree trunks. So most of the sits we faced the wall. So I was facing dark wood. And when I spoke to one of the teachers about my longing to face a white wall, she said, "Well, it's mine to work with." Part of my practice was making friends with my tree trunk. And after I think something like about day 18, we moved from practice period into session. And the number of people in the temple doubled. People came in from outside just for session. And at that point, I was moved to the other side of the temple, right in front of another tree trunk. So I spent my whole time there gazing at a dark wood, which kind of made me smile. Um, so back to my room. Because I knew I was going to be in a dormitory, I took with me little earplugs for nighttime and also these things that you stick across your mouth that are supposed to stop you snoring, because I know I can snore. Um, they were not a good idea. So Celine told me after the first night that I wasn't necessarily snoring, but I was kind of growling. And she said she'd rather that I just snored. So between the three of us, we kind of, we just kind of found our own way. We all snored a bit, um, but we were good at, um, communicating with each other, laughing. Not that we were supposed to talk most of the time, but we kind of found our own way to meet whatever the challenges were. So I guess one of the main gifts in Upaya was getting to watch myself in a totally new environment where nothing was familiar, different structure, new people, everything was new. Um, there were probably less residents than I thought. So with the residents and the people that had arrived for the practice period, there were probably about 30 of us in total at that first section. So 6:30 was dinner. We would go into the kitchen. So the next to the temple is what they call River House, which is where the reception and the office is, but also the kitchen and eating area. So we'd stand in a circle, hands in gasho, around the table. They'd hit the hand to the certain rhythm. Then the meal verse, which was earth, water, fire, air, and space, all combined to make this food. Countless beings gave their lives and labor that we may eat. May we be nourished that we may nourish life. Then we would step forward, help ourselves to food, and go and eat in silence, unless they use the clappers, which meant we could speak to each other over the meal. So I soon settled into the rhythm of these days. I'd leave my room about 6 in the morning, go to the kitchen, get a hot drink, sit under the stars. By 6:45, you could hear the hand being knocked, and we'd be called into the temple. You'd always enter the temple barefooted, bow, and go to our seat. And then the first verse was always, all my ancient tangled karma. So a lot of the verses were familiar to me, but the words were often, we kind of chanted them, but also the words were slightly different. Like the verse of the robe, the first two lines were the same, and then it was wearing Tathagata's teachings to awaken countless beings. So often now when we recite our verses, I've kind of got Upaya's verse in my mind as well. But mostly the verses were very similar. So in the morning, the first sit would be followed by service, which was a very complex series of, bells, chimes, drums, and we would step forward, we would step back, prostrations, repeating verses, and just watching how service would unfold. I loved the morning service. The residents there were amazingly conscientious at holding the form, very precisely. It was like it was like watching a dance, stepping forward, the stepping back. A bell in the temple, and then an answering bell from outside in the sun lounge area. So after service, we would attend soji, which was temple cleaning. So we had 20 minutes of cleaning. At Upaya, I got very used to spending a lot of time meticulously cleaning things that were already very clean. So for SAMU, which is called the work period, I was put on housekeeping, which is basically cleaning, which amused me because it's really not my strength. So I got very good at cleaning toilets, sweeping floors. Often in Soji, I was given cleaning the windows at the back of the temple. Mercedes teased me, saying I obviously had lots of obscurations, and that's why he kept giving me the windows to clean. So after that, 8:20 was breakfast. We were still in silence from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. During early practice period was always silence. I loved breakfast. I would find myself during cleaning just longing to be able to sit in the dining room and have breakfast. I'd often take it outside in the sun, early morning, kind of shafts of light, sitting with my bowl of porridge or whatever it was we had. And then, so after that, at 9:20, it would be our SAMU, our work period. So the timetables were often slightly different on different days. We had two Zazen Kai days over that first couple of weeks. We would have what they called personal practice period day, where you could make up, which were one of my favorite days, you could make up a packed lunch. And you can walk from Upaya down these footpaths that like take you down to the river. um, find lovely places to go down there and sit quietly. Um, yeah, and we'd come back for 5:30 for sitting dinner. And I often, especially that first week, I found the final sit from 8:15 to 9:15 at night a really difficult one. I think I still had kind of slight jet lag, and it could be so hard just keeping myself awake through that final sit. Do you know, I remember doing things like I was telling someone I used to like kind of think about migrating birds crossing huge oceans, being tired and hungry and just staying with it. And somehow it was one of those images that really used to sustain me. Um, so, I remember the relief of the final bell at 8:45 at night. And it would be followed by, you'd have, in the dark of the temple. So we would face in on our first sit, then face the wall for the rest of the day, then face in on our last sit. Um, and I loved facing in. I loved looking across the temple at the candles and the shadows. So when it finished, there would be this voice, and I think they were trained to use their voices. So this voice would come across into the silence. Let me respectfully remind you, what is it? The importance of the matter of life and death. Take heed. Do not squander your life. And I always remember that was always the last thing we heard at night before we then went to bed. So day 17. So it felt like those first 2 weeks were really settling into the rhythm. Um, most of it was in silence, plus times, when we could, short times when we could speak to each other, but there was a lot of silence. When we stepped into sesshin, it was stepping into total silence, phones off. And at this point, the numbers doubled. So in the temple, there was 60 people rather than 30. Sesshin, I felt was quite something. So basically, during the practice period, we had 3 teachers. So Senko was one, a beautiful young man. So I always thought of Senko and Kodo, if any of you've seen them online, as the elf lords. If we come back to me in the Lord of the Rings, these tall men with their long robes. So Senko would often also show us how to hold the form. And he was very good at it. He had quite a good sense of humor. So yeah, he was a strong figure during that time. And then there was Monchen, who very open-hearted, lovely teacher. And then there was Kathy Fisher. So before we went into Sesshin, Kathy described it as a chrysalis. For these next 6 days, we were kind of caterpillars going into that cocoon of Sesshin. So very disciplined, and quite an opportunity to watch my mind really sink into a deeper place. I think at some point before we went into Sesshin, all of us sat in a huge circle in the temple with a candle at the center, and we passed round a talking stick. So before we were in complete silence, we were invited to speak from the heart, just what was going on for us in this moment. And then again, right at the end, at the closing of Sesshin, we did another closing council. And that was amazingly touching and moving. It was like during that 6 days, the changes in people who just spoke directly from the heart. very, very beautiful to witness that last sharing we had before we all started to go our separate ways. Um, so the day became much more intense when we began sesshin. There was a optional sit at 5 a.m. I never made the 5 a.m. sit, so I'd be in the temple by 10 to 6. So we would have 2 hours, and then at 8 a.m. we'd have oryoki. I don't know if any of you have come across oryoki. Someone described it as like the Japanese tea ceremony. This is like the eating version. So apparently the instructions for oryoki number over 300 pages of protocol. So as you can imagine, it's quite something. I want to say oryoki is quite something. Because I was doing housekeeping, I was actually involved in putting together the oryoki sets. So you would have a serviette with your 3 bowls, with another serviette, with your chopsticks, with your meal verse, everything all wrapped up and tied in a certain way. So I was actually familiar with them when we went in and we each got our set. So first day of sesshin, start at 6 in the morning through to late. Then you're still in the temple. When we change around to prepare for oryoki, where we pull our mats back, create a little table, get our set forward, say a verse. And at that point, there's this huge hit of the drum. And I could never not jump out of my skin every time they hit the drum, where this woman would step forward with what looked like a red bird feeder. I never found out what it was actually called. And every step she took, there'd be this loud pound of the drum so it was very compelling. So she would go forward to the altar, do circles round. I think they had little offerings of food on the top, circles around, and leave that on the altar. And then the beat of the drum as she went back. And then the next thing was they send in the 2 servers. So the first 2 servers would come in with huge pots of food. Everything had to be carried up at forehead level. I remember after sesshin talking to a couple of the servers and saying, gosh, how are your knees? Because we would be in pairs and they would drop to their knees with the pan, to serve us. And they were like, well, actually, it's more your shoulders and your knees. It was being a server was really demanding. So at some point, we would lay out all our bowls, and the servers would come to us, and then we had to bow to them, and then they would drop to our knees. And then you would hold your bowl out, and you would hold your bowl with one hand, and you would use your other hand to say when you had enough. And then they would stand up, and they would stay until you bowed, and then they went. And this happened for every one of the 3 bowls. And then it happened with the seasoning. And then someone came around so you could put your sample of rice, and then you would say some more verses. So sometimes with oryoki, you're really quite hungry because you don't get that much food in your bowls. And I've described it as sitting with food in front of me for about half an hour before the head, teacher picks up her spoon, and then you can pick up your first bowl and eat. So we did that 3 meals a day for 6 days. Sat for 2 hours, and then the whole oryoki session. And then we would go and do an hour of samu, an hour of work. And then we'd be back in the temple again, sitting again. So I've still got my timetable from sesshin, and I was looking at it early thinking, gosh, there was a lot of zazen, a lot of sitting. And that, of course, was entering the chrysalis. Of course, there was also kinhin. So you would sit for half an hour, then you would walk, and it was quite an intricate pattern around the temple, which I soon learned. And then you could also walk along the sun lounge, which borders along the back of the temple. So I remember that feeling of bare feet on the floor, recognizing each other's feet, um, recognizing the way we all walked. So, so my experience of sesshin, I would say, um, over those first 2, 3 days, one of the most powerful internal experiences for me was anger, surprisingly. It's the last thing I would have predicted. I started experiencing feeling angry, which grew into like this fury. By kind of day 2 or day 3, I remember sitting on my cushion, kind of feeling like an image of one of those Buddhas that has just flames pouring from, my eyes, nose, mouth. And I just sat with it. I sat with like a deep level of fury. And sometimes it felt like it faded and then it would come back again. Um, so that was quite an energy that I sat with. I think also kind of what was it, day 3, something like that. I had quite a reaction to something I'd eaten the day before. So I went into the temple with bad guts, thinking, can I go with sitting? And it was a day when my knees had started hurting. I started getting backache. My guts felt awful. I was going hot and cold. My hands kept going like ice. And I sat through that day, and that was my tough day. That was a really tough day. And I remember thinking, just take the next breath, just take the next breath. Um, and then thinking it was easing, and then no, it wasn't easing. So that day, which I think was about day 3, that was the hardest day. Um, so I can't remember the order of things because it wasn't linear. I would shift in and out of different states. But I remember when that sense of fury dispersed, I got a clear memory, just fell in from nowhere, of a situation in my 20s. I was just back in every detail of the room. And I felt in every cell of my body the love that was present that day. Um, and it was profoundly moving. And I just sat and cried. I just sat with gratitude and love. And that would kind of move in and move out. But it was something that I felt stayed with me. So it was almost like whatever was shifting through me when I was in my raging place, it felt like it left a space that was kind of very clear and you know, just beautiful. That was just quite beautiful. And I'd walk outside the temple and I'd watch the breeze in the trees and I would think, it's the same thing. It's the same love. I also remember the feeling of sitting, feeling so connected with those people around me. Um, and we got to that point where the silence, you could have heard a pin drop. We were all breathing together. And I would think of it like the field of freshly fallen snow. Do you know, like that daybreak when you walk out and there's fresh snow? And it had that kind of spell, that kind of sense of something amazing and so clear. The energy just felt so clear. Another sense I had at one point was feeling at the still center of all things. And out there in the world was things happening and uh, life coming and going, but I felt like I was just kind of sat at the very center. So they were very kind of special moments that I found myself moving in and out of. And there was also the very human me that discovered about, I think it was a day or two before the end of session, that when I checked my flights, I had in my mind I was flying a day earlier than I was actually flying. So I was like, if something particularly happened, Celine and Mercedes and I would agree to ask for a moment to talk to each other. So I got them to look at the dates with me and say, "Oh yeah, I'm going a day later," which turned into, an absolute blessing because rather than rushing off, I booked an extra night and I had time to, to kind of say goodbye to everyone and really kind of come back to myself before I left. So, and it was really interesting that when Sesshin came to the end and we said goodbye, um, it kind of felt right. It felt right that this is the end. That this is time. This is time to leave. Um, and I left that piece and got the Uber and went kind of straight into airports. I flew to New Zealand, so I went from Santa Fe to Denver, Denver to San Francisco, San Francisco to Auckland, and it all kind of just flowed. That's what I mean about that whole period. Felt like it started leaving Manchester and it just flowed. I so even though since I've come home, I can see that I've fallen back into certain familiar patterns again. There's still a sense of quiet that I found at Upaya, that feels like it's still within me somewhere. And I can picture Upaya, I can picture it. So maybe Lynn, you could show the photos. I just put a couple of photos in that Lynn said she would put up just to give you a feel of the place. So that's the mountain. So when I looked out from Upaya, that was a view. And in Taizondo, which if you go online, it's a place where they do a lot of the talks. There's a painting of a mountain on the back wall, and that's the main mountain. So when I went for the walks, there was a lovely footpath down between the trees there that would take me down to the river. Next picture. So that's River House. So that's when you come to the car park, you walk down the path. That takes you to River House, which where you go in, and then the office, and then you turn to the left, and that's where the kitchen is, which also leads through to where the teachers' rooms are, which leads through to the temple. Okay, next one. Yeah, that's at the top of the path when you arrive in the car park where it says Upaya. Also, if you came back up that path, you could enter right next to it. There's a playground that I used to like walking around in the morning and sitting on the swing with a great big field there too. But yeah, that's the entrance to Upaya. Next one. So this is the entrance to the main temple. Um, I didn't actually manage to get inside with my camera because with my phone. But if you can actually go on YouTube and they will do a tour of Upaya where it takes you in and out of all the buildings. But that's the entrance to the main temple. And one more, which I think is a kitchen. Yeah, that's a kitchen. So that's it's lovely there. You could walk down two steps and there were loads of dining tables, and then you could go out the door outside, loads of dining, loads of wooden tables where you could sit and eat. Yeah, just gave you um, a little flavour of Upaya. So if we've got time, I think we've got time, haven't we? I just thought I would give 10 minutes if anybody wanted to ask any questions. I'm sure there's things I've missed out, but hopefully I've given you a flavour. So just see if there's anything anyone particularly wanted to know that I haven't mentioned.
Sally, I just wonder if you knew what it said over the main temple entrance.
Someone did tell me, but I can't remember. Sorry about that, Bar.
Okay.
There's someone called Kaz Tanahashi, a Japanese chap there who who does a lot of writing and paints all the beautiful Enzos are everywhere. I think he painted the letters, both over the temple and over Taizondo where the teachings are. Uh, yeah.
Oh, here I am.
Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Sally. Thank you so much. It was so moving hearing you talk about the experience. When you sat in the temple, did you have a chair?
During the practice period before session, I would do what I do with our retreats, which was I'd try and sit low, but every so often I would use a chair. So you could ask for a chair that would be folded behind your cushion. But for sesshin, you had to choose either a chair or a cushion. So I chose the cushion, which I regretted at times because it was quite demanding on my knees. I actually, in the end, ended up mainly using like a bench, seiza bench. But I found for oryoki, if I was on the bench, when you had to bow forward, I nearly fell into the big pan of food. So I'd get rid of the bench and go right down on a cushion. But because I've been down for so long, it was really hard to stand up afterwards. We would help each other. But yeah, I really wanted to do it, traditionally. Yeah.
Thank you. So a chair is available if you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Sally. Can you say something about the Dokusan and how that was for you and how it was organized, and also the Dharma talks and
Yeah.
something about that, please?
Yeah. So the Dokusan, they're these beautiful little Dokusan rooms.
Mm,
So the three teachers, there was a list in the kitchen that you would just write your name on whoever you wanted to go and see.
mm,
So to start with, I just put my name on one, and then the next, and then the next, um, and then they would call you out during a sitting period. So very similar to the way you do it.
mm,
Go and talk about how you're experiencing it, anything you wanted to ask. Um, yeah, I remember sitting with Senko, and he described to me because I was his robes were so amazing, and he was saying basically they're medieval, and he was showing me kind of all the level of robe and kind of
mm,
what it took to get dressed and everything. Yeah. The talks, I loved the talks. We didn't have them every day.
mm,
Um, but once again, the teachers would take it in turn,
mm.
to do a talk. I think often early afternoon. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can't, it's funny, isn't it? I thought I will go back and listen to all the talks because at the time I loved them.
Mm,
So I will somewhere have the recording of them.
mm,
And I did say to Lynn at some point, I would love to kind of, offer a talk, which I'd probably choose from Upaya.
mm,
Um, yeah, I did love the talks.
mm. So was there, you may have said, but was there a theme for the session, or were the talks whatever the teacher felt inspired to share?
Dogen, so actualizing the fundamental point.
Okay.
That
Mm.
was that was the subject,
Mm,
and so they were speaking around that. It was all
mm,
around that,
mm,
and we would study sessions. We did a couple of study sessions with Senko, where we would recite parts of the teaching that we were given. Uh, And so, yes, I realized at some point that, actualizing the fundamental point is awakening. Like at some point, it's like, oh, that's what he's talking about. Uh, it was a good subject. It was a good subject to have for the
mm,
practice
mm,
period.
mm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. Hi, Duncan.
Hi, you won't believe this, but Josh asked the question I was going to ask.
I thought you put your hand down.
No, it's okay. But Yes, but I was thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking something else. So when you presumably without your phone and you cut off from events of the outside world, how was that? Presumably you knew nothing
Well,
was going on in the world and news. How did that feel, just to be
well,
cut off from the rest of the world, or was that not the case?
well, during that first two, just over 2 weeks that I mentioned, you could check your phone. I mean, you don't, because when you're out of your room, of course, you don't have your phone, you don't have anything. Um, so I used to carry my key around my neck for the door. But if you need anything, you just kind of dash back to your room. The rooms were quite close, so it wasn't kind of so far to go. So I would just check my phone on those personal practice days. So I take my phone with me when I went down to the river, my packed lunch, my phone, and go and, message and just check in with people. I don't think I checked the news at all, which was really nice. But during session, you don't you switch everything. You agree to switch everything off.
How was that?
Great. It was great. But also, I was talking to Brendan about it, and I was confessing how during session we did have that agreement with the three of us that if there was something we were struggling with, we would request if one or both of the other women were willing to just have a little container where we could talk. That really made a difference. So that kind of really, really helped me because it's a lot of silence. It
Well, it is.
was it
Yeah.
was a lot of silence because most of the time was silent. Um, I loved the when they did the clappers at meals when we could talk. It was great to just find out something, especially about the residents. There were some really interesting residents staying there. Uh, yeah, yeah. Here we go.
Lovely. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you,
Hi,
Karen. Hello.
Sally. Hi. Really gorgeous to hear you talking with such passion and inspiration about Upaya. So I've listened to quite a lot of Upaya talks, and what I always love is right at the end, and I'm assuming these must be talks in the evening. They do this absolutely amazing chanting on three different like levels. Did you do that?
Yeah.
Oh, what was that like to be in the room?
It's great.
I can imagine.
It's great.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think it's just incredible to hear. Um,
Yeah.
and so I imagine myself in the room, and it's so,
Mhm.
it just sounds so kind of resonant.
Yeah. Yeah. The acoustics in the temple were great. And so I love that, but you could also get that with the movement, with the form.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and I remember them saying at one point, it's giving us that experience of like moving as one body,
yeah.
expressing as one body.
So if there was like chanting, like when you did the verse, the road, were they all done in the way we did it at the autumn retreat? Like, were they all done in that chanting way, in that
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
all
yeah,
chanting. The verse of the road they did slightly differently. So we'd be facing in for that first half hour.
yeah. Mm,
Um, and then this on the second chant, you'd put your rakusu on your head and face the wall. And
mm.
then on the third, you'd put it on. So it was, like there were
There
slight
was,
differences, which was really interesting.
okay.
But it was on the verse of the robe that you turned from facing into facing the wall.
There was that real sense of it being such an embodied practice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
lovely.
And so held. Do you know, it's like I early on I decided to miss one of the sits because I was so tired. And I discovered, oh no, you don't miss a sit. The next day they were saying, if for any reason someone can't make it, you go and find a teacher and talk to them about it. Do you know, it was strict. It was
Mm,
definitely,
mm.
yeah. which I kind of liked it. At the end, when I talked to two of the residents, they said, you really gave it everything you've got. And I thought that was so nice that that somehow came across to them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you.
thank you. Marie, hi.
Hi, thank you very much. It was lovely to listen to you. You described how one of the teachers with a bit of humor was talking about form. Did you, yeah, could you talk a bit about that? And also, did you have any changes in your form, and was there anything particularly helpful that you heard?
Well, it was more that it had extras attached, if that makes sense. So, so things like when we moved from sitting to service, we would you take the mats and move them across, but you were supposed to carry everything, up at forehead level. Um, so it was the way you moved, the way you placed, that you treated everything in the temple with respect. Um, the way you stepped onto your mat, off your mat. So a lot of it reminded me of what we did. It's just that it was kind of a bit more intricate. Um, and the residents who were holding the form, they were doing a lot of kind of stepping forward, stepping back, all kinds of things that were holding the service. Um, so yeah, so if I think of Senko giving instructions, it was like, when you're in Gasho, your elbows out, your um, so kind of precise details about things.
Mm.
Yeah. So they were always encouraging us, like in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, to sit very upright, they would kind of keep going over the details just in quite a supportive way. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Mm.
Hi, Brendan. You're muted.
Unmuted. I'm sorry, I can't work out how to put my hand up
You've
other than like that.
you're here.
Yeah. I was wondering, there's all these details, and I was thinking about that Oreo key, and I just wondered, as well as just saying that you do this like this and this like this and this like this, did they say why?
It's a very embodied practice, and it felt there was something quite sacred about it, as well as being just so mindful. So like so you're offering thanks with every bit of food that comes. Um, so it was there's something about sort of a profound appreciation, like something that I'll mention that happens at the end. So when you've done all your three bowls, then they bring along water and they put water in the big bowl, and you have like a tiny spatula. So you clean it all out, then you pour the water in the second, you clean it all out, and you drink some of it. And then you say a little verse about how this is the most delicious, the most delicious ambrosia that I offer to the spirits. And then they come round and you offer it. So all the way through it, like it's kind of there's an offering and a gratitude for what we receive. So it felt like it has all sorts woven into it. So it's like I feel like my body kind of got a sense of why we were doing it. It felt very much part of the discipline of the whole of Sesshin.
Mm.
Did you notice Did you notice like giving gratitude that kind of attention? Did you notice that yourself embodying that then?
Yeah.
Like a change, yeah.
Yeah. It kind of felt like part of a cleansing or something.
Mm.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
Hi, Jan.
Hi.
I was wondering about the well, first of all, thank you. It's really fascinating to hear all about it. And I was more curious about the food and whether you were involved in the preparation and how simple was the food. And I'll give you all my questions or thoughts. And how many meals did you have? Because is it true that they don't eat in the evening? So were you hungry? And yeah, can you?
We ate in the evening. Um, so I know when I did for passing it, you don't eat in the evening,
Yeah,
but we
yeah.
did. So during the first bit of the practice period, so because I was on housework, I wasn't on kitchen. So Celine, who was in the bed next to me, she was working in the kitchen. So I quite
Mhm.
envied her because I, I like cooking. Um,
Yeah,
the food was really good. The
yeah.
food was very good. Um, but when you moved to Orioke, you got a lot less because you've got
Mm.
these three little bowls, and often you didn't quite know what was in the bowl. I remember I used to dread the bowl of just white rice. And I was thinking, oh, this is all about let go of your preferences.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So with Orioke, you could go in the kitchen and make yourself extra food, which some people did, but I quite liked staying with the tradition.
Mm. Mhm.
So I did lose weight while I was there. I put it back on again, but while I was there, I
Uh-huh.
did lose weight. But there was you could always go and get yourself something extra if you wanted to. But
Mhm.
I quite like just eating what was offered. Really, really healthy food. Sometimes we have like miso soup for breakfast. So often kind of unexpected.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I think lunch was generally soup and salad, I think.
Mm.
Breakfast was often, either as kind of a soup or a porridge, some kind of porridge, and then a meal in the evening.
Mm. And what were the meals in the evening? Were they sort of rice based or were they varied?
Varied. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, often rice.
Mhm.
Often like dal and rice or
Mhm.
chickpea something.
Mhm.
Some quite interesting things. She was definitely the Tenzo was definitely a good cook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do they have like a resident group who work
Yeah.
in the kitchen?
But it's often changing. Well, they have a resident group who are kind of doing everything. You know, and they're quite young, and in a way, I think, gosh, you need to be young because they were
Mhm.
holding the form in the temple. They were in every role.
Uh-huh.
Because I think at the moment when I was there, there weren't that many residents, so it's quite a moving community. There was a young
Mm.
man there who was leaving when I was there, and he was going to Deer Park, one of Thich Nhat Hanh's. And he said he was moving because there was much more of an ongoing population of monks that were there for long term. And
Mm.
I did hear someone say at Upaya, they're kind of looking at how to change things a bit so that they get more long-term residents. Whereas at the moment, people generally just go for a few months and then move on.
Okay. Do they grow any of their own produce or
Yeah.
is
Yeah. One of the days we picked, which was amazing. So they had like three sisters growing, and I was lucky enough to be there, autumn.
mm,
So we went in and they did it all very ceremonially.
mm, mm,
So they had like a, kind of Native American there who explained everything, you know,
mhm,
did that with a ritual. So these beautiful ears of maize that were just red, beautiful colors. Um, and so the Three Sisters is the squash, the beans,
mhm,
and the maize.
mm.
Um, so yes, we brought all those in. I think of the food we were eating, that there wasn't that much that was grown. I think it was mostly brought in. But they do definitely have vegetable patches.
Mm. Mhm. Okay. Oh, thank you for that. That's interesting. So thank you again, Sally. Absolutely wonderful. And I really want to listen now to some talks.
It was nice. It's nice to share.
Mm.
When I signed up, I didn't know if Joan Halifax would be one of the
Mm.
teachers because often she is, and
Yeah.
she's a very interesting woman. It's one of the reasons I wanted to go
Mm.
to Upaya because I've
Yeah.
followed her for many years and kind of been quite fascinated by all the things she's done in her life. So I heard a bit more about her while I was there. And she came to dinner, about the first three dinners, but then she was going off to Japan. So yeah, I met her. She goes everywhere with Dinan at the moment because since she's had heart surgery, she's been much more fragile. But she's a strong woman. It's good to see her.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Sally.
The bottom. Sally, thank you so much. One last question. I know at Tassajara they wear robes when they're there. Were you wearing robes, or was there some kind of dress code for any?
Yeah, because one thing I found entering Upaya, I felt like I was kind of leaving my identity at the gate, sort of thing. And when as everyone can see, I always wear bright colours, so it was quite different for me, to have 26 days or whatever it was, just wearing black. So I did just travel with hand luggage because I only needed kind of two outfits really. And they've got washing machine. You can wash things whenever you want. But we just wore black. And I took my rakusu, and they said, "Oh, at the end, a couple of residents said, oh, we love your periwinkle rakusu." I was the only one there with a blue rakusu.
Oh, thank you for your sharing. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Mary.
Unmute. Yeah, I don't. Having had that experience, which sounds so profound, deeply connecting, do you have a sense of, how it is to come back, and what's it like just showing up here for what we do? And do you have a sense of where you might want to go with it all?
Thank you for that question, because I meant to say it was so lovely to come back to this Sangha. I love the just knowing you all, the smallness and the kind of bond and affection of this Sangha, because Upaya is so international, so it was fascinating going there, but it had such a different feel to it. So I had that sense of coming home, coming back to the Sangha, which was kind of just lovely. I love it that we are that kind of knowing each other size of Sangha. Yeah, but coming home, I had that feeling because I did a month there, then I did 6 weeks in New Zealand. And when I came home here, it was like, oh, is this my life? I really felt like I'd kind of, I don't know, sort of, I think you're just leaving everything behind. I didn't really think much about home at all. So when I came home, it was like, oh, is this my life? What a lovely life I have. So mostly since I've been back, I've just felt kind of really grateful, very grateful.
Yeah, so coming home feels good, and coming home to us and coming home to the rest of your life.
Yeah. And, when I was there, I kept thinking, oh, I've got to do the chaplaincy training. Oh, I've got to do, Green Gulch 3-month practice period. And at some point I thought, no, I don't, I kind of lost that attachment to all of the things and I came back and I don't know what I'll do next, but I don't have a sense of, kind of needing to do the next thing at all.
It's like it's complete, and you're just content, at least for now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cassie. Hi.
Hi. Thank you. And thank you for getting to your tough day and sitting in it. I really admire that. So I didn't have a question, but just an honoring of what you've done and sharing it with us. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Cassie. That's lovely. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, everybody. It's just thank you so much, Sally, to have brought your presence, you know, and to carry that. I can almost feel the desert air, you know, as you're talking. So I'm just so grateful to you for that and what you've brought back to the Sangha, because it's like that feels like that's a really important part of it. It's not just you, it's also then what you bring back and seed into everyone. So I'm really grateful for that. Thank you so much. So I think we should have the closing verses and then we can just see if there's any other things to say.